And now, here is your pandemic news report. All right, welcome everybody to the pandemic news report. Thank you for coming in. And we're going to talk about the old director so quickly, Susan Monarez, being outed, and director Jim O'Neill is in, also said to be like the acting CDC director. All right. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. Some moves are being made and some things are happening. All right. So, just recently, there was a new CDC director who was, I don't know if you want to say voted in or sworn in, and that was Susan Monarez, right? And so, real quick, we're going to go right into that just so y'all can get a look, and then we're going to go into a second video. All right, so let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS secretary, and I'm here with Dr. Susan Monarez, who is our new CDC director. She's the first director in American history who has been confirmed by the Senate. Dr. Susan Monarez, would you put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. I'm very happy to have Dr. Monarez aboard. She comes to us from ARPA-H. She's a tech genius, and she's going to drive AI and modernize CDC's data systems. And we're going to be able to provide first-class information, gold standard science to the American people.
I take this obligation freely.
Susan is an expert in public health, and I'm confident that she will do everything that she can to restore the integrity of this agency.
The duties of the office. Thank you, sir. I am truly honored and humbled. Thank you so much for your support over the past several months. I am so honored with the privilege of heading up CDC. It's such an important institution, and I look forward to supporting you over the next several years as we continue to make America healthier again.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you very much, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
All right, so there you have it. The CDC director was just sworn in maybe some months ago, right? And then some turn up events occurred and some things changed up, right? And so with that being said, now we have a new sitting director, which is Jim O'Neill. So we're going to take a look at this video, and then we're going to break some things down between the two, because it seems like there could be some funny business going on, or maybe it's given the appearance of funny business, but we'll see if it's a good move, bad move. We'll just break some things down. All right. So let's check this out.
Health Secretary and former tech investor Jim O'Neill has been named acting director of the CDC, despite questions about the legality of the previous director's firing. Susan Monarez served as director of the agency for less than a month before she was removed from the position by the White House. Several other top CDC officials resigned in protest. Skylar Henry has more on the shakeup.
The turmoil inside the CDC spilled outside the agency's Atlanta headquarters. Hundreds of current and former employees gathered in a show of support for top officials who have now either quit or been fired. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis was in charge of vaccine recommendations.
What the last 24 hours felt like? Intense. Yeah? But a lot of love from CDC.
Along with the CDC's chief medical officer, head of infectious diseases, and head of public health data, Daskalakis resigned in protest. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder spoke to Dr. Daskalakis.
Something is wrong when politics rules science, and we're not able to have the best science, true gold standard, make sure that we're doing the right thing for the people that we serve.
It was a show of outrage from federal workers in a week when the administration also suspended about 20 workers at FEMA for publicly criticizing cuts at their agency. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had been pushing for the CDC's director, Dr. Susan Monarez, to leave.
There's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people.
Monarez refused to go, and Wednesday night, the White House fired her.
If people are not aligned with the president's vision and the secretary's vision to make our country healthy again, then we will gladly show them the door.
A lawyer for Monarez says she was fired because she refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives.
This is what makes CDC great.
Dr. Daniel Jernigan was a director responsible for infectious diseases.
Let's get the politics out of public health. Let's get back to the objectivity and let the science lead us, because that's how we get to the best decisions for public health.
Acting Director O'Neill previously had posts under the George W. Bush administration serving in the Department of Health and Human Services. Prior to that, he was also a biotech investor, and he's also worked alongside Secretary Kennedy since last November as it relates to the Make America Healthy Again initiatives and proposals. Something else to point out here is that he will play a significant role as it relates to vaccine recommendations, and that is something that has been a point of contention for leadership here at the CDC and those who work here. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Atlanta.
All right, so we're going to go over this video just a little bit. Let's look at it again. And of course, this is definitely fair use. And let's dig a little deeper and see what's going on. And then we're going to get into some comparisons between Susan, they call her last name Monarez. Some people pronounce it Monarez. And then compare it with Jim O'Neill. All right, so let's listen into this video again.
Well, Deputy Health Secretary and former tech investor Jim O'Neill has been named acting director of the CDC, despite questions about the legality of the previous director's firing. Susan Monarez served as director of the agency for less than a month before she was removed from the position by the White House. Several other top CDC officials resigned in protest. Skylar Henry has more on the shakeup.
All right, she was removed by the White House, according to what he was saying. We'll listen back to that again. Moved because of the White House. Just been in there for just a month. All right, so let's listen to this again.
Despite questions about the legality of the previous director's firing, Susan Monarez served as director of the agency for less than a month before she was removed from the position by the White House. Several other top CDC officials resigned in protest. Skylar Henry has more on the shakeup.
So we have some CDC employees also resigned because Susan Monarez was moved out. Now, just on that real quick before we move on. The people are leaving. Some employees left because they got rid of Susan Monarez, as opposed to just staying in, right? And if they're such, have such qualifications, good qualifications, and they can be of service to help the public at large, why should they do a protest resign or a protest leave? Now, it makes me think and wonder, were they really, truly interested in protecting the people, or they were more interested in protecting or standing up for Susan Monarez? You got to ask these questions, and at least makes you wonder if this makes any type of sense, right? Especially if you're supposed to be protecting the health of Americans, right? I don't know what their capacity, these people who decided to leave because the White House got rid of Susan Monarez. I don't know what their qualifications were, how good they were at the CDC. But I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder, or at least think, you leave because as a protest leave, possibly as a protest leave, as opposed to sticking it in, pause, as opposed to staying there in the CDC and continuing to protect the U.S. people's health. Seems really suspect to me. But we'll go ahead and continue. Let's listen in.
The turmoil inside the CDC spilled outside the agency's Atlanta headquarters. Hundreds of current and former employees gathered in a show of support for top officials who have now either quit or been fired. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis was in charge of vaccine recommendations.
What the last 24 hours felt like.
So this guy, Daskalakis, I think that's how they pronounce it, was in charge of the vaccine distribution. Let me just listen to that one again.
Or been fired. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis was in charge of vaccine recommendations.
What the last 24
Vaccine recommendation. Daskalakis, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Vaccine recommendation. So are they saying that he was fired as well, or did he leave as a protest? Let's listen to that again.
Hundreds of current and former employees gathered in a show of support for top officials who have now either quit or been fired. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis was in charge of vaccine recommendations.
What the last 24 hours felt like. Intense. Yeah. But a lot of love from CDC.
Along with the CDC's chief medical officer, head of infectious diseases, and head of public health data, Daskalakis resigned.
Okay, it's saying that Daskalakis resigned. We're going to play that back real quick. I just wanted to see, it says CDC resignations. So these people here, Dr. Deborah Howry, you got Dr. Daniel Jernigan, Dr. Jennifer Layden, and Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis. All these folks resigned. And so again, I say, and maybe they resigned because maybe they received word that they were going to be fired. So maybe and we don't know because we'll listen to the video again, but maybe they got word that they were going to get fired. Who knows? Or if they were just resigning in protest as opposed to quitting. See, that's just another thing in itself. You want to resign. That way it's always a possibility of getting your job back as opposed to just flat out quitting. And all of these should raise some questions in your mind one way or the other, even if they was doing this as a protest, resigning because of the White House getting rid of Susan Monarez. So I guess they call themselves standing up on her behalf. But if they was really for her, if they were so strong about it, you would think they would just go on and just quit. But they resigned. And I guess their thinking is if they're going to be gone for so long, they can wait to the next presidency and they'll probably get moved back in, or they can get back in. We don't know. One doesn't know. So this kind of raises some questions a little bit, but let's go back just a little and then listen back into this.
Hundreds of current and former employees gathered in a show of support for top officials who have now either quit or been fired. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis was in charge of vaccine recommendations.
And one more thing before we continue, notice how the reporter's saying they either quit or were fired. Is resigning quitting? Is that really quitting, or is that their play on words to kind of get people in a certain mind frame, right? Because my understanding is always when you resign from somewhere, there's always that possibility of getting back, as opposed to if you just quit, then people can say, well, you just quit. But if you resign, that's always, well, I resign and maybe I'll come back later. Notice the game playing, right? But let's continue.
What the last 24 hours felt like? Intense. Yeah? But a lot of love from CDC.
Along with the CDC's chief medical officer, head of infectious diseases, and head of public health data, Daskalakis resigned in protest. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine.
So now we know that Dr. Daskalakis resigned in protest. He didn't quit outright, where he can't get his job back. He resigned as a protest. So there's that play on words: resign, quit, resign, quit. Is quitting really resigning? Is resigning quitting? All right. What are the results, if you will, from quitting outright, knowing that you're not coming back, you're never going to come back, you're not going to expect anybody to ask you back. If they did ask you back, you're just not coming back. Quitting, right? Resigning, I'll fill out some papers, I'm going to resign. There's always the opportunity to return. Somebody asks me, come back later, I might come back. I'm doing this just as a protest because with Susan Monarez, to them, it's like, well, this is my friend. I like her. They got rid of her. I'm gonna leave too. But wait a minute, let me resign just in case so I can get my job back later on.
Gounder spoke to Dr. Daskalakis.
Something is wrong when politics rules science and we're not able to have the best science, true gold standard, make sure that we're doing the right thing for the people that we serve.
It was.
Now, I also want to speak on that. A lot of these folks, these scientists, doctors always talk about science, the true science. They won't allow us to deal with true science and the science. But the situation that happened with the pandemic makes you wonder, why didn't they deal with science at that time? Because a lot of people were seriously injured because they, quote unquote, because of the science. And if he's the Daskalakis is one of the groups that was part of the pandemic situation, and knowing how that really turned out, should this guy even continue to be in the CDC anyway? Like I said, we don't know too much about him, what role he played during the pandemic, if it was on the more positive side or if it was on the negative side, if it was bad for the people or good for the people as a whole in America. We'll probably never know. Maybe there's files where we can find out. But right now, we don't really know about this guy. But all of a sudden, he pops up out of nowhere, right?
Daskalakis resigned in protest. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder spoke to Dr. Daskalakis.
Something is wrong when politics rules science and we're not able to have the best science, true gold standard, make sure that we're doing the right thing for the people that we serve.
It was a show of outrage from federal
rules science and we're not able to have the best science, true gold standard, make sure that we're doing the right.
I just wanted to stop this so you could see what his position was. The former CDC vaccine chief. Very important, I think. Vaccine chief. What was his role if he was employed during the pandemic times as the vaccine chief? I think earlier they mentioned that he was responsible in having a say-so in vaccine distribution, something along those lines, right? So, yeah. So right now it's looking like he did a protest resignation, although they're saying he quit. They always keep using the word quit. You always got to watch the gameplay with words, the wordplay they use in the gameplay. You got to be very diligent in listening when these news reporters say things, and even when the people themselves that they're interviewing say certain things as well. Okay?
Right thing for the people that we serve.
It was a show of outrage from federal workers in a week when the administration also suspended about 20 workers at FEMA for publicly criticizing cuts at their agency. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had been pushing for the CDC's director, Dr. Susan Monarez, to leave.
There's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people.
Monarez refused to go, and Wednesday night, the White House fired her.
If people are not aligned with the
So Monarez, I guess she was getting the word like, hey, you might want to start packing your bags up before we fire you. And I guess she had the opportunity to resign herself. But her thing was she's not leaving. So I guess she was just going to wait for them to fire her as opposing to just resign and leave on her own. Right. So she just went on and waited until they said, look, well, now you're fired. We gave you opportunity to leave, resign, but now you're fired, right?
And Wednesday night, the White House fired her.
If people are not aligned with the president's vision and the secretary's vision to make our country healthy again, then we will gladly show them the door.
A lawyer for Monarez says she was fired because she refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives.
Okay, refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives, which could suggest that word was going out that, hey, they would need her to rubber stamp things that wasn't quote unquote scientific. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting to the point where these folks are just using words because no one really checks them and puts their feet to the fire and giving a more detailed explanation when you're talking about science. What science? How science? What do you mean by science? What's considered not scientific? So on and so forth. So it's like they're playing this little slick word game with folks, and now it's probably more than ever, and probably from now on, people need to be really paid attention to and just not easily trusted anymore. Maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was probably a bigger trust in these doctors and scientists and stuff like that, thinking that they were going to really be on the up and up and not be involved in any foul play of any type. But now everybody needs to really get put under the microscope. You know what I mean? So again, she refused, according, to the lawyer, refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives. So maybe they was already trying to tell her, hey, we need you to do X, Y, and Z and approve. We need this approved. We need that approved. And she was probably like, well, no, we're not. If it's not us checking it scientifically, I'm not just going to sign off on all this stuff and just agree to sign off. So I guess that was their thing, to get rid of her. And thus, I guess they found somebody that they can put in there that will just do what he's told. But we're going to look into both of their qualifications of the two, and dig a little bit deeper before we get out of here. All right, so let's listen in again.
Then we will gladly show them the door.
A lawyer for Monarez says she was fired, but Wednesday night, the White House fired her.
If people are not aligned with the president's vision and the secretary's vision to make our country healthy again, then we will gladly show them the door.
A lawyer for Monarez says she was fired. Her.
If people are not aligned with the president's vision and the secretary's vision to make our country healthy again, then we will gladly show them the door.
Not aligned with the president's and the secretary's vision, right? Not aligned. If she's not going to be in line or aligned with the vision of the president and the secretary, then this partnership is not going to work. the thing is what is the vision of the president and the secretary? Are their visions really to keep people healthy, or do they have another plan and they wanted her to go along with their plans? Because also we got to consider and talk about Fauci as well, and how Fauci played a role in all the stuff that was going on. And so maybe Trump has now remembered all that situation regarding Fauci. And we don't know if Susan Monarez is also has some links to Fauci or not. That's not being mentioned, but there might be some more insider information that's not being told. Whether the news knows this inside information or not, or it's just among the executives and people in government, there might be some other information at play that we don't know, that the president probably knows, that Trump knows, that the secretary knows, other people know, and who knows? There's a lot to consider and look at. Very much so. So let's continue listening in.
People are not aligned with the president's vision and the secretary's vision to make our country healthy again, then we will gladly show them the door.
A lawyer for Monarez says she was fired because she refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives.
This is what makes CDC great.
Dr. Daniel Jernigan was a director responsible for infectious diseases.
Let's get the politics out of public health. Let's get back to the objectivity and let the science lead us, because that's how we get to the best decisions for public health.
And also, you don't know if these folks are playing a game with each other, or one's playing a game and one is not, but they're going to try to make the other group look like they're playing games. This guy here, I think his name is Jernigan, his last name. And he's saying that, they're playing politics. We want to get back to just straight up science and letting the science lead us to make the right moves. But if certain people are not really on the up and up in the CDC and never were, how would you know if they're really going to do what this guy's claiming and saying about wanting to continue doing, dealing with the science, letting the science lead us? We don't want this political game going on. You're just playing politics. Because I don't like this group, I don't like that group, or I'm going to say this group did something that they wasn't supposed to. I'm going to get rid of them. We have our own vision, as the I forgot what the lady's name is there, but she mentioned, well, if Susan Monarez wasn't in line with the vision of the president and the secretary, then they had to let her go. See, so you got to really pay attention to all the little nuances and the things that are at play, because these folks are indeed playing with your life, your family's lives, our lives, and that includes the president and these members of the CDC who are against the president. All right. So we definitely need to get things down to boil them down to the nitty gritty of what's really going on.
Acting Director O'Neill previously had posts under the George W. Bush administration serving in the Department of Health and Human Services. Prior to that, he was also a biotech investor, and he's also worked alongside Secretary Kennedy since last November as it relates to the Make America Healthy Again initiatives and proposals. Something else to point out here is that he will play a significant role as it relates to vaccine recommendations, and that is something that has been a point of contention for leadership here at the CDC and those who work here. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Atlanta.
All right, so I guess O'Neill is also going to be giving recommendations, and I think that was the job also of the chief vaccine CDC chief or vaccine chief, that Delaskis, I think is pronounced his name. So, and then Jim O'Neill is said to apparently have worked with, or in some capacity had some type of networking with Kennedy, and so on some level. So I guess there's some familiarity, excuse me, with Jim O'Neill and Kennedy's. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull up some information about Susan Monarez, I think they're pronouncing it, and Jim O'Neill. Okay. Let's see here. Let's pull this up right quick. All right. So, qualifications of Susan Monarez, PhD in microbiology and immunology. And before we continue on, it was quite interesting that it was mentioned when Kennedy, the first video that I played for you, that Kennedy was mentioning something about her being very good in tech. And although in some, depending on how and in what type of way, you know, what role she plays in tech, what her knowledge is on tech, and how that can play a positive role for the health of Americans, we don't know. But my initial thought was, well, what is technology? Her having a knowledge, be knowledgeable in tech when she should be more knowledgeable with health and things of that sort. Viruses, bacteria, pathogens, period, right? But I guess there is some room there to be technologically sound, because you can use technology in the health field as well. But anyway, her qualifications is PhD in microbiology and immunology, earned from University of Wisconsin, Madison, conducted infectious disease research, including postdoc at Stanford University School of Medicine. Scientific research background, she focused on technologies to prevent, diagnose, and treat infectious diseases like African sleeping sickness and toxoplasmosis. All right. Government leadership and public health roles, fellow at AAAS, that's from 2006, 2007, advisor at BARDA. And you guys always write these things down so you can research them yourself, what BARDA is, what AAAS is, and what SARPA from 2009 to 2013, which has the H, it's spelled HSARPA, I believe. She was an assistant director for National Health Security and International Affairs, director of medical preparedness policies, including pandemic preparedness efforts, deputy assistant secretary, excuse me, for strategy and data analytics, DHS, led research portfolios and international health collaboration, founding director at HRSA's Office of Planning, Analysis, and Evaluation, deputy director of ARPA-H from 2023 to 2025, overseeing AI and ML projects across healthcare, including equity and opioid interventions. CDC leadership, served as principal deputy director and acting director January to March 2025, confirmed by Senate 51 to 47 vote as CDC director for July 2025. That's when she had her, I guess, 1 month run. First CDC director in over 6 decades without an MD. All right. I guess apparently that's supposed to mean something. Track record of science-based systems level approach, recognized for her focus on public health systems and innovation in crisis response. All right. On the surface, I don't know, maybe that sound like she has something there. So let's look at Jim O'Neill, who is now the acting CDC director. His education is Bachelor from Yale Humanities, MA from University of Chicago Humanities. Early public service, held several key roles at HHS. During the Bush administration, 2002 to 2008, Director of Speech and Editorial Division, Associate Deputy Secretary, Principal Associate Deputy Secretary with responsibilities covering HHS policies, FDA, the NIH, BARDA, and more. Private sector and investment, managing roles at Clarium Capital and Mithril, I think how you pronounce it, Capital. Peter Thiel affiliated, CEO of the Thiel Foundation, co-founded Thiel Fellowship and Breakout Labs, CEO of SENS Research Foundation, 2019 to 2021, focused on anti-aging science, plus board roles in biotech ventures. I want you to pay very close attention to that. Keep that in your mind for later on. All right. His focus was on anti-aging science. So far, it doesn't seem to be not much as far as dealing with making sure the general public are healthy. All right. So it's HHS Leadership 2025. Confirmed Deputy Secretary of HHS June 2025. Later appointed Acting CDC Director post Monarez's ouster on August 2025. Now check this out. Not a scientist. No medical or infectious disease training. Background is humanities and tech investing. All right. And you see the sources there. The Guardian, Fortune, CBS News would be the source of that. Right. So he's not a scientist. He has no medical or infectious disease training. His background is in humanities and tech investing. Now, anybody can feel free to leave a comment, whether now or later after watching this. How does humanities and tech investing play into him being responsible for the health of millions of Americans, right? Yeah, feel free to put it in the comments. Publicly controversial views, okay? Let me see something real quick here. Okay. Publicly controversial health views, all right? He's previously advocated for the FDA approving drugs based on safety alone, delaying efficacy evaluation to the marketplace. All right, that's something pretty deep. All right, he's previously got to know what these people are about. He previously advocated for the Food and Drug Administration approving drugs just based on the safety alone and delaying to find out whether or not the drugs will work. Are they good? Are they going to be beneficial? So that in itself says a lot. Do you want this guy to be the director of the CDC? Right now, they're calling him the acting director, which could note or denote or indicate they're probably going to move him too or get rid of him at some point and put who they really want. All right, but here's some other publicly controversial health views of this Jim O'Neill guy. Past promotion of unproven COVID-19 treatments, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, I think I pronounce it, and vitamin D, made conspiratorial social media remarks about COVID naming. So past promotion of unproven COVID-19 treatments. Well, from what I hear, of what I heard from over those past years of the pandemic situation, people were saying that ivermectin was actually actually did work. And people were saying, there were some doctors that were saying that vitamin D was good for those who was in that pandemic situation. So they saying that his past promotion of these treatments that were unproven, but they later proved to actually have some benefits. So that part of the controversy, I don't know. I don't say that's a bad thing, because just my own keeping my ear to listening and looking up things, there were doctors and scientists who were saying, and some things have been kind of legit, that vitamin D and ivermectin. I can't remember about the hydroxychloroquine, if that was something that worked. I know I've heard that being mentioned a lot of times, but I just don't remember the results from that. But I heard for sure that it was being mentioned after everybody was being banned for saying that. Now it's been coming out that ivermectin actually did help, and vitamin D as well. So we won't ding him on that controversy, but let's check out the next one. Experts in new outlets highlight his deep knowledge of HHS mechanics, but note the lack of scientific credentials. All right. So yeah, it's beneficial. I guess you would want a person that's kind of knowledgeable about viruses and had virology training of some sort, microbiology and things like that. So you will want somebody like that, probably more. But does that actually disqualify a person because they don't have that information? Because you can have other employees in the CDC who actually have that knowledge. So you can always go to those people. All right. You got to consider the team as well. Even if you don't have certain informations and knowledges, but others do, and you know that, then they can still be utilized. So that's if you want to really determine, because the person doesn't have certain knowledges or lacks certain scientific credentials, does that really mean they need to get booted or shouldn't have the job? Let's move on. So here's a comparison. Aspect scientific medical training. Susan Monarez has a strong PhD in microbiology and infectious disease research. Jim O'Neill has none. He has humanities background, no medical or disease expertise. And again, I say, would that still disqualify him when you have other employees who do have medical and disease expertise, right? So now, under the public health and policy experience, Susan has extensive roles across OSTP, DHS, HRSA, ARPA-H, CDC leadership. Jim O'Neill has only moderate HHS leadership in early 2000s policy roles only. Innovation and system focus, Susan has, they say yes, AI and ML in health tech systems level preparedness and evaluation, while Jim O'Neill is business-minded, tech innovation, but not necessarily public health systems. Okay. And the political alignment, Susan has been confirmed by the Senate, more traditional public health anchor, and Jim O'Neill's closely aligned with RFK Jr. and Teal, viewed as political appointee, excuse me. All right. So controversial, even though it says he has aligned with RFK Jr. still wanted Susan Monarez or Monarez. Now, the controversial positions, excuse me, Susan, they say, is pro-vaccine, science-driven stances. She's pro-vaccine and science-driven stances. All right. Which could be a bad thing. Okay. If people are just more, well, I just depend on the science, and they're the types that don't really, if they see something out of place, question it, because the science could be wrong this particular time or that particular time. But they're making it seem like she's just she just goes with that and that's it. She's going to put her trust in the science. And then she's pro-vaccine, which could be very damaging if a vaccine is not really on the up and up. Now, the controversial positions with Jim O'Neill, they say, advocated for risky drug approval ideas, endorsed questionable treatments. But like we mentioned, those questionable treatments were ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and vitamin D, which now I know 2 of the 3 have been said to have actually been a benefit for people if they took that, if they took ivermectin or vitamin D, or maybe both, who knows? So, but at the same time, it still could be, when it comes to those controversial positions between the 2, they both can be a possible problem if we ever have a situation again that turns to be similar to a pandemic, which some say the plandemic, right? So as far as their controversial stands or positions, they can be beneficial and they can be very risky and damaging to the general public at large. So that's still under question. So Susan Monarez brings deep science credentials, public health systems expertise, and a strong track record in health innovation across multiple agencies. And Jim O'Neill, by contrast, brings more of a policy and investment background, no formal health science training, and has raised red flags among public health experts for his controversial views on drug approval and past promotion of unverified treatments, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But on the surface, if somebody just listens to somebody say, well, this guy was promoting unverified treatments, and then you find out 2 and 3, 4 years later, those unverified treatments turned out to be very good treatments. So see how people can play on your mindset with stuff like this? So the lesson seems to be, when you hear certain things, look them up, find out for yourself, know for yourself, get as much information you can. Also be aware, be mindful when you see videos, you hear things, you hear interviews. Also put that into your mindset as well, or gather that intel, I should say. That's probably better. Make sure you gather that information too. Gather the information that you do your own research on, and then also listen to people when they say things. Jot down certain notes for yourself, because things can pop up later and you can refer back to your notes and go, oh, that's what that was. This is what that was. This is what this person was really up to. Or I see the games they were playing, or I see that they was really on the up and up, and what they were saying was actually something that would work, right? So that's what it's all about. You really got to gather your own information and analyze it yourself. And that's what you call a critical thinker and a person who thinks independently and thinks for themselves. You gather the information you hear people say, jot all the information down, look some things up yourself about what they're saying. You might find information, new information, when you look up what other people were saying and what you found out. And then it might lead you to do more research on certain things. And then you'll be able to connect those dots. All right. So we definitely appreciate y'all for checking us out today on the Pandemic News Report. And let us know what you think about this and put your comments in. And we will see you on the next one. So we appreciate y'all coming in. This is the Pandemic News Report. We will see you guys later. Peace. And now, here is your Pandemic News Report. What you are about to see was real life. Fauci and Mayor Bowser were knocking on doors like block captains, pushing jabs like they moving weight. If you thought this was about health, you haven't been paying attention. Check this out.
People in America are not settled with the information that's been given to us right now. So I'm not going to be lining up taking a shot or a vaccination for something that wasn't clear in the first place. And then you all create a shot in miraculous time. It takes years to create vaccination.
Well, it used to take years.
Okay, it used to.
You know how many years were invested in this approach? About 20 years of science to get us to be able to do it.
20 years is not enough. And 9 months is definitely not enough for nobody to be taking no vaccination that you all came up with.
The only reason I'm talking to you right now, as close as we are, is that I've been vaccinated.
Right.
But if it allows thousands of people like you don't get vaccinated, you're going to let this virus continue to percolate in this country and in this world.
Something like the common flu then, right?
And not
it's
like
much
the
more
flu.
serious than the flu.
Well, the flu kills a lot of people annually too.
You know how many people died of the flu the last year? I mean, not this year, virtually none, but the previous year, about 20 to 30,000. You know how many people have died from COVID-19 in the United States? 600,000 Americans.
Well, the number that you all giving that died, that's once again, that's you all's number.
You gonna pass?
Yeah, definitely. Because when you start talking about paying people to get vaccinated, when you start talking about incentivizing things to get people vaccinated, there's something else going on with that. Something else going on.
It is something going on.
There's something else.
You're right. But I'm glad millions of people like me and most everybody here didn't get an. You know what their incentive was? Protecting their health and protecting the city. But I won't keep you anymore.
It's okay, because my incentive, y'all campaign is about fear. It's about inciting fear in people. You all attack people with fear. That's what this pandemic is. It's a fear. It's fear, this pandemic. That's all it is.
Now you see what it really was. No science involved, just straight up pressure tactics. If you want more, get the Fauci files. Fauci's dirty secrets exposed. Straight truth, no sugarcoat. The link's in the description.